What's up, guys? I'm Alex.
I'm Jason. We're the Table Monkeys, and we are here with a video to talk about an epic match that happened this past weekend at East vs. West 14, which was
an epic card.
Yeah, well, I mean, people that have been around the sport for way longer than us are calling it the best event ever. And just even looking at what happened in this match, having John Brzenk, the new blood of Leonidas, and then having Neil, Travis, and Devin all commentating on the match, and then having guys in John's corner like Cobra Rhodes and Bob Brown. I mean, it was just there were so many people at this event. It was just
deep. Like kind of the old versus the new. We got like Devin versus Chance, John versus Leo, and Michael Todd versus Camille,
and Todd Zilla versus Prudnick getting that win back, which is definitely young and old because Todd Zilla is almost 60. Just behind.
I think Prudnick's in his 30s, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so similar spread to Leonidas and John Brzenk, which is the match that we were going to talk about today. Obviously, we've been on a big kick with the martial arm wrestling lately, and talking about that side of the sport and really analyzing it and discussing it. And John just put on an absolute masterclass.
I think it's the most fun to talk about anyway. Like, obviously getting strong is cool, but how long can you spend talking about how to get strong and how to lift weights and get strong for arm wrestling? But the actual combat side of arm wrestling, the technique side, the ability to beat someone who's stronger than you, that's what we get a kick out of.
And this was, again, a perfect example of that. Like Devin said it during the match, and I think he's 100% correct. I don't think there's one lift that you could possibly measure that Leonidas wouldn't destroy John in. And then this is definitely an example of one guy who is physically, like I said, in almost any way, basically any way you could possibly measure, way more physically able than John, but John's experience was just on another level, and his martial arm wrestling, the way he manipulated the positions and the sport to take advantage of everything was just amazing. And he was in some bad positions.
Even in the intricacies of the hands, Leo was arguably stronger. Right? John was able to maintain some certain fundamentals that kept him in the match, but he couldn't maintain center. He couldn't maintain the rise, the high hook position, which you typically see technical arm wrestlers at least be able to maintain against stronger opponents. He wasn't able to do that. He really had to dig deep to stay in the match.
Yeah, he even got a little bit desperate, which also maybe had a lot to do with fatigue as the match extended, because in the beginning of the match, he was controlling the position much higher on the table, where by the end of the match it was like very low, and he was getting dangerously close, or I think we both agree, he was definitely using some King's move tactics throughout this match. So we want to talk about, we'll just go, there were only 4 pulls really. There were 2 in round 1, and then round 2 and 3. So we're just going to kind of discuss them and also touch on a little bit of what the difference is between King's moving and open top rolling, because that was really what he was utilizing, those 2 moves a lot. So it's going to rely on the straps. So we're going to throw this on and get to explanation of what we think happened. All right, guys, we're all strapped up and ready to go. We're going to try to get through this quickly. We could obviously probably talk about this match for like a half hour if we wanted to. So we're going to try to do our best to not let that happen, even though we can obviously get a little wordy sometimes. So beginning of the match, John controls the top game when they slip. Looks like he's got some hand control, but now they're in the strap. The strap doesn't lie. You're going to be Leo. I'm going to be John.
Of course, I look like Leo, so that's only right.
Super jacked. So let's get through. The hit's pretty even off the go, right?
But Leo gets a bit more off the go, and they're both top rolling, trying to maintain the high game.
Yeah. But John clearly kind of is able to control the height in this first pull. He doesn't worry too much about center of table as far as like peg to peg, but he's definitely trying to maintain as much back pressure and pad to pad position as he can, right?
He's trying to maintain all the fundamentals in his hand, but the wrist flexion does go a little bit because of Leo's pronation in his top roll.
Yeah, and this is where we really want to explain what we feel is the difference between the open top roll and the King's move. In this position here, John is open top rolling because he's still using flexion. Like Alex said, it is giving up at some point, but it doesn't look like it's being taken. It looks like it's just John playing clever, but as soon as Leonidas gives up any pressure, John is pulling back with flexion this way to try to bring the match over here. Eventually, with some back and forth, but and Leonidas pulling himself out of position a bit, John does get himself back here. Maybe he's not like cupped in, but he's not kicked back. He's definitely at least flat wrist at this point.
He's definitely at least pushing this way with some wrist flexion.
Yeah, and
the way not gaining it.
The main thing that we feel defines the difference between an open top roll and a King's move is this pressure, where the active pressure that Alex is feeling and that John is going for is this way across the table. He's cupping, he's pulling back. Yes, he's leading with pronation and rise, but he's trying to cup and pull in across this way, where with a King's move, pronate, rise, and then I'm pulling away. Like when you're pulling a King's mover, you feel this weird pressure in your hand that they're trying to get out of your hand because they're not pulling into you. They're actively coming away from your hand. So in this part of the match, John is definitely in an open top roll. That you're in a bad position. This shows how experienced Leonidas already is for like a 3 years in puller.
Yeah.
He takes the professional foul, and we get a restart. He gets a much better hit the second pull in round one. Gets John out here. At this point, I think John is still open top rolling. I think he's still trying to fight for flexion. But he feels like he's not really sure if it's there. Leo is obviously, you may have seen our video about regripping and creating a threat. This is obviously something Leo could benefit from because every time he stood up, John was able to get something from it. The first time on the stand-up, what he does is he comes in and sets the hook, right?
Yeah. John sets the hook on one of Leo's attempts to come back to center. But kudos to him, he does great from this position.
Yeah.
He's gets the high hand from the get-go, and then he's working it. He's working, he's regripping, he's driving across. John doesn't really like it because Leo's getting some movement at the arm.
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, Leo's got a lot of hand control, and he ends up taking John's
a little bit of wrist flexion, and you can see John's fingers kind of like losing contact. Like he can tell that Leo's worked up into his hand, and he kind of makes a bit of a desperate move to try to roll him out. Leo's hand is obviously still conditioned and strong enough that he doesn't lose his flexion, and John gets in what looks like an ugly open top roll position, which is now what we believe a King's move because he's maintaining drag. He's got pronation above everything else. At this point, because of what happened in the hook, he has lost his rise, but as long as he's got that pronation and drag, he knows that he's in the match, and Leonidas isn't really able to finish. And Leo, right at this point, as this roll happens, this is where Leo had a great opportunity. If he was more experienced, he would have stood up and just taken advantage of that spot and pressed, but he kind of falls for the bait of a King's move, feels this opening, and starts to top roll. And by doing that, it plays into John's hand here.
Yeah, and the tension that must have been on his wrist in that position been through the roof.
Yeah, and at this point, we're not trying to say that John is actively trying to King's move. He's not hitting for a King's move like Michael Todd does. He's just trying to maintain certain fundamentals that he knows are going to keep him in the match. And they happen to be pronation and drag, which is a King's move, right?
Right.
And he knows that he wants his rise back, or he wants to fight for rise somehow.
All he did was just run down the hill to the bottom and end up in a King's move.
Exactly. It just comes down to the fundamentals of the sport and what he is able to maintain to keep him in the game, right? And that, like Alex said, brings him down the hill to a King's move.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, and then the most obvious transition from a King's move, the way you see most King's moves finish, is once this opponent starts to tire and get annoyed of this pressure and stands up for some sort of relief. As we said, this was definitely where Leonidas' experience was hitting him, was trying to regrip. He was not creating any kind of threat. So as soon as he stood up, John's able to just get under there or get behind there and press, right?
Yeah.
And you heard the place erupt. I know when I watched it live, I was like, holy fuck, like it was absolutely epic. It was just such a fucking unbelievable moment, because you really felt like once he went out to that roll, like oh shit, he might not be able to do it here. But again, he knew he was still in it. He was patient, and fuck, it was unbelievable. Anyway, as I said, we want to try not to talk too long about it, but that round was where a lot of the technical differences between King's move and open top roll and all that happens.
Yeah,
the next 2 rounds, go ahead.
Yeah, that's where he started running down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
The next 2 rounds, he basically knows where he's going to end up, and his plan kind of starts there.
Yeah, and I think if you've heard Devin talk about it before, one of the worst things you can do when you find the answer is go directly to it. You still have to work your way through the hill, and John still does that. Like, he still tries to win this and fight here, but he ends up here almost immediately. So now he's like, okay, I got my drag and I got my pronation, and we're going to live with that. At this one, he gets taken pretty far out. Again, as soon as Leo comes up to get some air, John dives in and gets into this weird, almost looked like he was going for a press, but ends up in a really defensive hook position. And then from there, does one of my favorite moves where he starts to push, like drag his elbow in to get his shoulder more behind it, and then works his way across the pad. Leo is now King's moving full out. You can see his hand has let go if you watch the match, and he's way out there, and then John, bang, presses through. That round also absolutely epic. That transition, the way John was transitioning from outside to inside.
Very, very risky. Like, he's so far on his side of the table going in for a hook.
Yeah.
It was, ballsy.
Yeah, and probably not something he would do against a more experienced puller, but he obviously felt enough in Leonidas's movement that he knew, or he was confident enough that to make that kind of a ballsy move.
Yeah.
But now here's where fatigue is really playing a factor, because in the end, what does give out is Leonidas's arm.
Yeah, 100%. His bicep completely tires by the end. He got ripped open in round 2 when he was trying to fight in that King's move, and he again gets the same position here in round 3. And he's just pulling with his bicep because he doesn't really know how to transition and take the pressure off his bicep.
And he doesn't know, it may look like John is using a lot of bicep in this position, but it's because of this King's move, which again, like understanding the difference between this pressure and this pressure. And when you're applying this pressure,
even if you're supinated.
Yeah, even if I'm supinated a bit, as I'm applying that pressure, when he tries to push down on me, it's like I'm able to use the drag and that pronation to create a wedge that uses the pad in my elbow to, like, so that the down pressure is actually going into my elbow this way. You know what I mean? And it's because I maintain this drag. So John's not using a lot of bicep, but like Alex said, because Leonidas is trying to pull, and Leonidas is pulling with his bicep, not with his lat, where John is pulling with his lat. So John's got his whole lat engaged, waiting for Leonidas's bicep to tire. There's some good play here, and you can see Leonidas either just trying to come up and press, or knows that John is going to come forward and is blocking it with his own press. It's kind of hard to tell because it's so minute what the movements are, but something along those lines is happening between the two of them. And then you can see John kind of commits more like this way, and Leonidas is really trying to pull him out that way, and then Leonidas's bicep just gives out, and John, you can see he kind of feels it, and then he makes a very easy transition to a press, and it goes down right away. Based on if you watch that film too, you can also see Alex, the strap isn't on tight, and I'm not applying the pressure very hard, but because we're actually in that position, it just fucks with your hand so much.
Yeah.
And right before Leonidas gets pinned, you can see he's almost like, you can see him trying to wrist curl John in, because he can tell.
Yeah, and that's another sign that he was facing in King's move. He couldn't gain wrist flexion.
Yeah, because the only thing John was doing was hanging on to that, and you can see his forearm just filling with blood and getting all pumped as he's trying to wrist curl him in, but his wrist is still flat or just a little bit back, and that's where John can feel like, okay, his arm's got nothing left, and comes in for that transition. Just unbelievable understanding of the pressures on the table. That's when it really becomes like wrestling, where you're using the pressure that's happening on the table against your opponent or in your favor or whatever.
And that's when it becomes beautiful as well. Like, King's moving is not ugly. It is a beautiful move. It's a counter. It's a way to stay in the match. The feet a stronger opponent.
It's a bait move. It's a bait, right? And that's what happened both those moments there where because John gave up enough and maintained what he needed to, Leo was baited into, I can finish him this way. And I don't know how many times I've pulled Crazy George and been right there in that same spot doing the same thing where I'm trying to finish, and it just won't happen, you know? And the tricky thing with George is even when you do get up to press, unless you beat his hand, you're just going to be pushing into a wall. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
The point, like Alex said, it is a beautiful move. There's so much to it. Understanding how to beat it, you know, like Camille against Michael. Michael did an amazing job, but Camille definitely had some opportunities there if he knew how to pull a King's move. Like he definitely played into the King's move in the first couple rounds horribly.
For sure. But Michael is a genius King's mover.
Yeah.
The way he's able to maintain his side of the table with a King's move and make Camille chase him, it's on another level.
And the King's move is a beautiful move.
Yeah.
And
it's not going anywhere.
No. And the point is what we said. There's so many moves on the hill. Once you really understand how they work and the fundamentals, it all starts to make a lot more sense. You know. Anyway, epic match, epic event. Thank you, Ingen. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody that had something to do with that day because it was epic.
It was.
Yeah,
so,
history in the making.
Let us know what you think about our comments. Was it a King's move? Was it an open top roll? Was it just desperation? Let us know. Like, comment, subscribe.
Make sure you go watch the video on East vs. West. And monkeys out.
Peace.
Cha!